Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra. He is one of the famous writers in the history, but his life is so complicated. Let's go back to his past. He was born on September 29, 1547 in Alcalá de Henares, a small village in Madrid, Spain. When Miguel de Cervantes was young, he began to write poems. When he is still young, he injured a man with his sword, and he had to flee Spain to Italy to escape justice. He enlisted in the Spanish Armada and fought against the Turks in the Lepanto battle where a bullet destroyed his left hand, rendering it useless. Then on, he was nicknamed the One-Handed Man from Lepanto. But his misfortunes didn't end there. When he was returning to Spain by a boat, pirates attacked them and he was captured as a prisoner. By then, looked to an African city. Algiers, when he was imprisoned for 5 long years. Finally, he was freed in a rescue operation and he eventually managed to get back to Spain. Later, he was married and began to write plays, but his curse had bad luck continued and he was not able to make a living as a writer. He was imprisoned once again because of a money issue, and it was during these months in jail where he began to write the play which gave him eternal fame. The ingenious gentleman Don Quixote of La Mancha, in it he narrated Don Quixote's adventures, accompanied by his loyal squire Sancho Panza. It did give him great glory and fame, but his little else as lived the rest of his days immersed in poverty and one of the greatest novels of all time. Lastly, Miguel believes that even if you have the constant bad luck, you should always stay positive. Fight for what you believe in and never give up on your passions. Even though he's generally had bad luck, and he managed to do great things doing what he loved most, writing and creating. Eventually, Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra died because of type 2 diabetes on April 22, 1616, but his writings and legacy will live forever.
Cervantes' story, The Adventures of Don Quixote, takes place on the plains of La Mancha, specifically the comarca of Campo de Marte. The story also takes place in El Toboso, where Don Quixote goes to Dulcinea's blessings.
Almost all the happenings in the novel happens on the Spanish countryside. When it comes to describing the Spanish countryside, it's Cervantes' narrator who supplies us with some of the most poetic lines in the entire book. In the early 17th century, in a little village in the region of La Mancha, Spain, an aging, wealthy man named Alonso Quijano finds himself bored. He very much enjoys stories about knights and fair ladies and adventures and dangerous encounters, but mere books are not enough. He decides he will actually become an adventuring knight himself. He gives himself the title of Don Quixote. He searches out an old suit of armor which belonged to his great-grandfather and makes a helmet out of an old metal hat covered in wood. His only horse is unaged and slow as he is, but to him the animal is a splendid charger, and he names it Rocinante, and he chooses a lady to love and fight for from afar. She is a peasant woman named Aldonza from the nearby town of Toboso. Don Quixote has only heard of her and never actually seen her, but he calls her by the noble name of Dulcinea del Toboso and is certain she is beautiful and worth fighting for. All that remains is someone to officially dub him a knight. On the evening, the first day, Don Quixote rides past an ordinary inn. To him, it is a castle with fine ladies and magnificent feast. But the next morning, when the innkeeper expects him to pay for his room and his food and his horse's care, Don Quixote is incensed. In the many stories he has read, knights never pay for anything. He soon begins fighting and trading insults with everyone who passes by to get him to leave. The innkeeper makes a great show of blessing Don Quixote as a knight and encouraging him to just ride away, which he does without paying. Next, Don Quixote makes a man stop beating his servant boy. But the moment Don Quixote leaves, the man is even angrier than before and takes it out on the servant boy. The noble efforts have only made matters worse. When Don Quixote believes that the caravan of merchants have insulted Dulcinea, he tries to fight them. But poor Rocinante falls down under the strain, and Don Quixote is unable to get up again in his clumsy armor. The merchants beat him and leave him injured, but he accepts the pain as a part of being a chivalrous hero. This incident proves to Don Quixote that a knight needs a squire to assist him. He chooses Sancho Panza, a short, heavy peasant man. Sancho rides his beloved donkey, Dapple, and both of them are sturdy, honest, and hardworking. The man goes along for the journey primarily because of Don Quixote is wealthy and Sancho is glad for the work. Sancho is simple and practical, where Don Quixote